For almost 50 years, Midway USA has been America's go-to source for just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors. Go to midwayusa.com to see our latest deals and promotions and take advantage of our super fast same-day shipping. If you need a cooler, a new fishing rod, another rifle, ammo, or a reloading press, you can find it all at midwayusa.com. Thanks for your business. Midway USA brand product designers have one straightforward goal: develop high-quality, technically sound products and deliver them to customers at reasonable prices. If you are immersed in the shooting sports industry and pay close attention to every single detail, you know our products are built right and stand up to everyday use. Who has shooting mats and range bag systems to hunting clothing and just about everything for the outdoors? Log on and shop 24/7 with super fast shipping. MidwayUSA.com.
Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com. We're experts the quarry and culture of fly fishing. Here at episode 369, we're talking about starting off in winter fly fishing. This podcast episode is another installment in the series that we call the Cast1 Fly Fishing Podcasts. And that's a subset within the larger Casting Across catalog where the information is aimed a little bit more towards a new angler or maybe somebody who's fished a lot, in this instance, in the quote-unquote season, and now you want to give it a shot in the off-season. So this would be relatively new information. Now, if you've been fly fishing in the winter your whole life and you are, generations of fishing under your belt, then this could still be beneficial to you because there may be a tip or trick that I talk about that you had either not thought about or not thought about in a particular way. Or, as I always say, if you are bringing people alongside you under your wing, training up folks in how they should fly fish, then maybe something I say will resonate as you try to communicate that to that person. So anyway, I will dive into it. I'll give you more resources at the end of the podcast, but for now, we're going to talk about a few very, very basic things that go into winter fly fishing. The first one is why. Why fly fish in the winter? As I'm recording this podcast, there's about 8 inches of snow on the ground, and the flurries are intensifying by the minute. And the last thing you might want to do is put on your waders and go walk into a river. However, the fish are there more often than not, and the fish are eating more often than not. Things changed a little bit, and without diving too much into the very, very basic science of it, cold-blooded critters slow down when their environment is cold. And so trout will eat because they have to eat, but they're not going to be as aggressive. Now, are you going to find a fish that chases a dry fly or torpedoes after a streamer? Of course. But generally speaking, they're not going to be as active. Now, part of that's because of their own biology, but some of it too is just the ecosystem and the other animals' biologies as well. For example, there's less insect activity in the wintertime, which is the primary forage source of most trout. So the fish eat, so you can go out and do it. It's just not going to be the same as you're going to find in June or in September. Another reason why you should try fly fishing and why you can go fly fishing in the wintertime is that most water, particularly special regulation waters, are open if they're ice-free. So a lot of the catch and release fly fishing only water that you find across the country, they're going to let you go and fish year-round. There are some times, depending on what species of fish are in those rivers, where very late fall, early winter, and then late winter, early spring are going to be closed down because of spawning. But generally speaking, you can fly fish throughout the most of the year in most places. But of course, check your local regulations. Another reason why you should consider it is that you can have the water to yourself. Those rivers that were absolutely slammed in the beginning of October and are going to be completely overrun on opening day, whether there's actually an opening day or not, are going to be devoid of most anglers. And the fish are going to be there. They might be hard to catch, they might be hard to find, but you have them to yourself, and they're going to be seeing less pressure. And in my humble opinion, I would rather fish over a fish that is slower due to environmental reasons than one that's slow due to angler pressure. I like dealing with that blank slate a lot more. So Those are some of the reasons why you can and why you should go fly fishing in the winter. So where do you go? So we've already established that you go anywhere where there's fish. The fish are going to more or less be in the same place. Now they are going to move a little bit in as much as they move a little bit over the course of a day or even over the course of a season. But when you move into the wintertime, fish are going to be looking for a few basic things. They're going to look for thermal refuge. So they're not going to stick around where they're going to freeze solid, nor are they going to go where there are no bugs. So they're going to go places where they and their food sources are finding thermal refuge. So that could be as simple as sunnier spots. If there is a river and there's shade on one side of it because of the stream bank, the riparian vegetation, and where the sun is hitting it, or there's a cliff or something like that, and that side is shady and the other side maybe has some sunshine, there's a greater chance this time of year they're going to air towards the side where there's sunshine. So even though you might have been fishing that deep undercut bank on the far side, if that is shrouded in darkness virtually 24 hours a day in the wintertime, that might not be the most productive spot. Maybe that little tiny depression on the other side of the stream that's usually shallow, that's usually not getting as much action the time you're normally fishing there, that's going to be a spot where that fish is going to post up because they're able to get some of that security that they would have gotten with that undercut bank, but now they also have the benefit of the thermal radiation, not radiation like they're getting, radiated, mutant trout and whatnot, but just the sunlight coming down, bouncing off the rocks, warming up the water. Another thing that you can look for is places where there is a warmer water influx. So generally speaking, larger rivers are going to be warmer than smaller rivers. Okay, shallower rivers are going to be warmer than deeper rivers. So you find a place where that shallower feeder creek dumps into a larger river, and you're going to see a fish that maybe drop down from that feeder creek into that larger river. One of the fun things to do this time of year, and I'm recording this in early December, one of the fun things to do is go to rivers that are usually like smallmouth or panfish or fall fish or carp rivers and fish the river mouths where trout rivers dump into them. And so places where you would never normally fish for trout during the, again, quote unquote season, you now find them because they're dropping down from their creek into a river, and they are finding thermal refuge, and they're finding a little bit more options for forage in that spot. So that's a one good thing to look for. And again, you're not trying to skirt regulations, but there's opportunities to fish in streams and water bodies that you might not be able to fish early in the season or late in the season. Another place to look for fishing opportunities is anytime there's some sort of runoff situation. Now, that sounds kind of gross. Why would I be fishing in runoff? But I've fished beneath power plants. I've fished beneath like where storm drains from cities empty out. And sometimes there are some less than pleasant aromas. But these are places where fish will find a couple degrees of benefit in their water that they're swimming in, and they're going to gravitate towards those places. May not be the most picturesque, might not be the nicest, but there's definitely an option there. Also, if you fish and live in a place where there are springs, whether they be actual spring creeks or they just be spring seeps, knowing where these places are give you that same benefit with a lot more pleasant aesthetic than some sort of runoff situation. One of the things I talk about quite frequently is in the summertime, pay attention if you're wet wading where that water is really cold inexplicably. You might be able to not be able to necessarily identify and isolate where that spring is coming up, but if you can find it and feel it with your feet, with your knees as you're wading around, you come back there in the wintertime, that water may be a handful of degrees, maybe 10 degrees warmer than the water that's flowing across that spring seep. And so the fish are going to seek that spot out. So those are some of the wheres to where you can fish. The radiation piece, take that for what it's worth. Okay, this is what happens when you don't edit podcasts too much. Is you say things like that and you just roll with it. All right, next thing, how? Three main strategies that I like to employ in the wintertime. Of course, you're going to go and read the water. You're going to pay attention to what's happening. You know people who are fishing. You look at the fly shop. You look at the online river report. You know kind of what's going on. But generally speaking, three things that I like to do when I am fly fishing in the wintertime. I will go from my the most productive, but also what I enjoy the least, to what is the least productive, but what I enjoy the most. All right. And this is maybe true all year long. But the most productive thing to do is tight line nymphing. You might say, I don't want to buy a 13-foot 2.8. Okay, you don't have to. Remember, we've been tight line nymphing long before Euro nymphing, broached these shores. Okay. It's a very methodical way to cover water. And when it comes to fishing in the winter, fish that are going to be having to deal with a little bit of slower metabolism, they're dealing with colder water, they're wanting the most bang for their buck with their energy usage versus their calorie consumption. Putting a nymph, a big juicy bug, or even a small juicy bug, in front of them so all they have to do is open their mouth or move their head ever so slightly is the highest possibility to get into fish. And the most efficient way to cover the water column is to tight line nymph in an organized manner where you break the river down into a grid, both vertically and horizontally, and you cover as much of that water as you can. Now, this is by far the most productive way to fish in the wintertime, barring some sort of exceptional situation. I think a lot of other anglers would say this is probably by far the most effective way to fish, period. But here in the wintertime, it really does dial in what you need to do to find fish. You may find a particular depth, and now you're catching fish. I remember a few years back, I was fishing out in western Massachusetts on a relatively large river, and most of the day, not a lot going on. I was doing some of the other tactics and strategies that I like to do in the wintertime. Finally went back to tight line nymphing, made a bunch of casts, moved the split shot, nothing. Made a bunch of casts, moved the split shot, nothing. Finally, I get down to where I'm like bouncing, not off the bottom though, split shot's bouncing off the bottom, but the fly is suspended above it and start getting into fish. And I was able to go back over a lot of that water I covered, and I was getting into more and more fish. So it's finding where those water fish are in the water column and then being able to make that presentation consistently and over again. There's another benefit to not casting really far, but maintaining a tight line, and it has to do with iced guides. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But it's a very methodical approach, tight line nymphing, and all you need your normal gear, and all you do is just cast such that you have a relatively tight connection between your rod tip and the fly line going through it, all the way down to the belly of the fly line, which isn't bellying too much, into your leader, down to your fly. Now, I think tight line nymphing is more valuable than fishing with an indicator in the wintertime because those strikes are going to be more subtle. Again, big Venn diagram. You got heavy strikes and you got light strikes. The light strike part of the Venn diagram is going to be the winter, but of course there is going to be a segment of that where they overlap, and there are going to be some heavy strikes even in the coldest weather because fish do what fish do, and none of us can see in their minds. It's also a great opportunity for you to dial it in. If this is a strategy that you want to increase your competency with, this is a great time to do it. You're not going to be distracted by all those bugs buzzing around. You're not going to be distracted by necessarily aggressive fish chasing after streamers. Now's the time to say, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out what those really gentle strikes feel like. I'm going to dial in how I can get my flies to depth based on weighted flies, based on combinations of flies, based on using split shot, other things. And maybe you do have that Euro nymphing rod that you've just been kicking around that you haven't enjoyed using. Now's the time to really become familiar with it because it is your best option at catching fish this time of year. All right, so tight line nymphing doesn't need to be a Euro situation, doesn't need to have special gear. You can just use that 9-foot 5-weight and your normal 5-weight line and a leader that is going to get your flies in front of those fish. That's the first thing. Second one is streamers. So I was just saying, fish aren't going to be aggressive. Why fish streamers? Well, again, it is a simple equation in the mind of a simple organism. How many calories am I going to benefit from after I expel this much energy? And if you can put a big chubby streamer in front of their face, probably stripped a lot slower than you would in July, and probably maybe not even as large. If you just bounce that streamer in front of their face or gently strip it in front of them, then you're going to entice those sorts of strikes. I like swinging streamers in the wintertime. So that means that if I cast across the river, like casting across, cast across the river and allow that streamer to just drift following the arc of my fly line. So it's dragging to a certain degree. Again, that drag being when that water is influencing the motion of that fly. You don't want that with dry flies. You don't want that with nymphs. You there are situations where you don't want that with streamers, but here now it's making that streamer swim kind of in a slow arc back towards completely being downstream from me. And so I can do that, and then I strip it back in. Take a step, same cast, do the exact same thing. Now I'm effectively covering all of that water. And if that fish has any aggressive inclination, it's seen my fly swing by him, but now as I'm stripping it back in, it can trigger that strike. But again, what I like about this is it is a good way to dial in where those fish are. Again, it's very much an exaggeration and an overstatement, but usually in the wintertime, fish are going to be found in a relatively consistent location in the stream as opposed to the middle of the season where they're going to be a little bit more diversified in where they put themselves because they have a little bit of a broader spectrum of options when it comes to dissolved oxygen, temperature, things like that. So first one is tightly nymphing, second one is streamers, thirdly is midges and hatches in the sun. So I love fly fishing using midges, tiny flies, little dry flies, little tiny emergers that are in that 20, 22, 24 range. If you get sun hitting a spot, those bugs are going to be hatching. Maybe even first thing in the morning when it gets light, those bugs are going to be hatching. You're going to see little stone flies. You're going to see other tiny little mayflies hanging out on the snow. Take advantage of that. If they are emerging, then fish that emerger. Now you can, catch your dry fly in the middle of fish in the middle of January. So just be ready for that. Pay attention to that. Know that you're going to need to have a nice finesse presentation, nice light tippets, because again, these fish are going to not want to be moving a lot. So they're not going to be rising from the bottom of the stream up to the surface film. They're probably going to be sitting there a couple inches below and just nosing up. And so you're going to need to make nice, delicate finesse presentations. And this is something that in some ways is easier from a presentation and casting standpoint, and certainly a strike detection standpoint, than tight line nymphing for a new angler. So you're kind of picking your poison. You're messing with that 7X and that size 22 fly, but you can see what's happening. So it's a great way to develop confidence. This is certainly true for spring creeks and tailwaters in the wintertime, just like it is the rest of the year. But this also happens in freestone streams, or that is to say, rivers that are not bubbling up from the ground and not coming up from the bottom of a dam. Okay, so we've talked about why you can fish in the wintertime, where you can fish in the wintertime, how you can fish in the wintertime. Now, what? What do you bring with you? So I'll talk about here at the end of the podcast some other resources for this, but I would just say nothing special, especially if you're new. You don't need to go out and buy new stuff, with one great exception: clothes. So you will see, lines that are designed for cold water fishing, whether it be saltwater or freshwater, and they're great and they're good. And as you become much more proficient in this, and you're able to appreciate some of the nuances of why a fly line is designed, formulated, its material itself for fishing in the winter could be a benefit to you, then yeah, you could pursue that. But honestly, I think for most of us, we don't need to worry about it day in, day out fishing season to season. But warm clothes are an essential. And I'm going to talk about two things because there's a lot more about this on Casting Across elsewhere. One is make sure you have airflow when you want to stay warm. So we are not necessarily warm because of the clothes we are wearing. We are warm because of the way that those clothes insulate us from using our body heat. That is why so many synthetic materials have loft and have puff to them, and why quilting matters to kind of maintain that air in between those fibers. That's why a natural fiber like wool is so great, because although it feels really dense at a much more magnified level, there's a lot of area for air to get in between those fibers. It also wicks moisture away. So you want more airflow, less moisture. So don't use cotton. Don't use your tube socks with the 3 red stripes on them. Don't use your jeans. Get a nice pair of wicking fleece pants. If they're going to go under your waders, they don't need to have some sort of water repellent finish on the outside. Just regular old pants will do. A nice pair of fleece pants and a nice fleece, maybe a base layer, whether that be wool or some sort of polypropylene, is going to be fantastic. The same thing with socks. Just because you have super duper warm socks, if you have to cram them into your wading stocking foot and then cram it into a boot and there's no area for that air to flow, it's not going to matter. Your feet are going to get cold. So that's something to keep in mind as you buy wading boots. as you buy socks and as you buy waders. If one is super, super snug and fits great with that lightweight sock and it's wicked comfortable in the summertime, it might not be the best pair of waders or boots for you in the wintertime because you're not getting that airflow and your foot is not keeping itself warm. The best wool sock is not going to help you if it is smashed and compressed between the neoprene of your waders, which is a non-breathable material, and your foot itself. So I would say that that's the most important thing for somebody who wants to fish in the wintertime, particularly if you are wading. And there's a completely different situation with walking in your clothes and in your waders and actually standing in that river. Not only is that water going to kind of suck the cold out of you a lot faster than the air, even if the water temperature is warmer than the air temperature, but also the water is going to exert pressure on your foot and it's going to compress down boot, wader, sock as well against your foot. So just something to keep in mind. Try to maintain the best of your ability some airflow. The other thing that will kill you faster than anything else, I'm speaking hyperbolically, is having cold hands. And my absolute favorite thing to use, and I've used everything. I've used neoprene mitts. I've used fingerless gloves. I have used full gloves that I've pulled off with my tooth. I've used the gloves where you pop the finger back. My absolute favorite ones now are mittens where you can pop the cap off of your fingers or your thumb. This again, lots of airflow in there. The majority of the time you're fishing, you don't need the dexterity of your fingers. It's only when you're tying knots and doing things more intricately. You can strip line, you can cast, you can do all that sort of stuff with those mitten parts covering your fingers. That's my absolute favorite thing. You can get a bunch of different brands. You can get them where they have a waterproof coating, or you can get them where they just fleece. Whatever it is, use it and keep your fingers warm. All right. I mentioned before guides. So this is one piece of equipment I would actually say is worth buying. I'll give you a name brand and example at the end in my recommendation, but have a product that will keep your guides. Let me rephrase that. That will mitigate your guides from freezing. Your guides are going to freeze up no matter what. As that water or your line passes back and forth through your guides, all that water that's on your line is going to collect on those guides. And once there's a little bit, there'll be a little bit more, and there'll be a little bit more, there'll be a little bit more. And so there's a couple ways you can deal with this. Do not snap it off. Although a lot of the materials that make up your guides on your fly rod are going to be pretty robust and are going to hold up, they're not going to hold up to being snapped repeatedly in cold weather very well. What you can do is dip your fly rod under the water. That water that is flowing is warmer than 32 degrees. Otherwise, it wouldn't be flowing. So dropping under there will pull that ice off. But again, as I was saying before, the less you cast, the less ice is going to form. And excuse me, when I say that, the less casting where you're actually shooting line. So if you're just flipping a nymph rig over and over again, it's going to really cut down on how much ice is going to build up on your rod. Especially if you have a good, nice tight line presentation, you're going to keep that in a pretty static situation between your guides and your rod tip. So that's just something to be aware of. It is frustrating. There's a lot of things people do. I'll give you my favorite thing to use here at the end of the podcast. Last thing I'd say is go with somebody who knows. Doesn't mean necessarily getting a guide, although that's not necessarily the worst thing either. Go with somebody who knows. There's a different rhythm to fly fishing in the wintertime. And fishing with somebody who is not necessarily an expert, but just somebody who knows what they're doing is very, very helpful. And there's no shame in that. No shame in saying, hey, can we go fishing? Come on, watch what you're doing. Or even just having a guide take you out and fish in the wintertime. Just do a half day. It's not going to be the worst thing in the world. And it's worth spinning your wheels or getting frustrated really, really quickly. All right. Well, I mentioned before that there's other resources, and so I'm going to rattle a few off right here. So there's other podcasts on this topic here on Casting Across. Episode 324 is called Fly Fishing on Ice. It talks about some of the things you can do and can't do when you have ice around. 261 is called Cold Fly Fishing Encouragement. And this, I talk about some of the things I talk about today, but in greater detail, ways that you can push through the discouraging nature of how cold and still it is when you're out fishing. Episode 222 is ideas for off-season action. So some of it is fishing, some of it is fishing adjacent. As I'm looking at these, there's lots of articles. These are all just podcasts I'm mentioning. Episode 213 is called 4 Winter Confidence Flies. These are 4 flies that I like to use in the wintertime. That I've talked about confidence flies recently in the podcast. These are 4 winter confidence flies. I talk about tailwaters in episode 212, which, of course, tailwaters are a great option if they're around you in the wintertime. Episode 169 is called Winter Whatnot. It's me going through some things that I do in the wintertime in the off season, that again, fishing and not fishing. Episode 157 is filling a winter fishing pack. Some of the gear that I carry, not necessary, mind you, but that I carry in my winter fly fishing pack. And then last one, I think, is 104. It's called Chill in the Air, Trout in the Water. And again, it's a lot of the information that I talk about here, just a little bit more in depth. There's a lot more resources on Casting Across, and of course, all over the internet. And I would absolutely encourage you to find something that helps you. If something I talked about today is something you have a question about, let me know. Matthew@castingacross.com. In fact, next week, episode 370, is one of my accusations podcasts where I interact with listener, reader, and viewer questions, comments, and accusations. So if you have a winter fly fishing question, I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear it. Let me know. Matthew@castingacross.com. This week on Casting Across, the first article is called Follow Your Favorite Brands to a Fly Shop. Something that I've been encouraged by, and this is kind of why I wrote this article, was how many brands are listing their fly shops that you can buy their stuff in. Even though they all have direct-to-consumer options, I think it's really cool that some brands are making a focus of this, especially the last week was like the Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Small Business Saturday, all that sort of stuff, because it's being recorded the week after Thanksgiving. So it's cool to me that brands are doing this. And again, this is consistent with what I know about the people that I know, that I spend time with, I talk to in the industry. They're out to raise the tide and get all of the fly fishing ships up. So check that out. In that is a link to the updated fly shop directory, and over 400 fly shops now. I think it's like almost like 450. And if you see that your favorite shop's not there, or you see a dead link, or you see something like that, let me know. Again, Matthew@castingacross.com. And then Wednesday's video is called 2 Books for Young Fly Fishers. And here I talk about Andrew Weiner's Down by the River and Tyler Beefus's Orvis Kid's Guide to Beginning Fly Fishing. So one is a storybook, and the other is a how to fly fish book for kids. They're both good books. Watch the video and pick one up for the young person on your holiday shopping list. This week's recommendation on the podcast is, as I mentioned earlier, Stanley's Ice Off Paste. Who's Stanley? I don't know, but Loon Outdoors sells his Ice Off Paste. So this is a little $9 quarter-ounce tub. If you've ever used like a floatant or even a sink product, that's those little quarter-ounce tubs. $9, great. It doesn't get rock solid. It is the kind of thing where you can dip your finger and your forefinger and your thumb into this little tub, even in cold weather, smear it on your guides, and it will limit, not eliminate, because I don't think anything's going to eliminate, limit the amount of ice that builds up on them. And of course, it's designed to be used with your gear. So some of the examples of stuff that is out there, I don't know. Is it going to cause problems to your fly line? Is it going to cause problems to your rod, to your cork, to your gloves, stuff like that? Synthetic materials really respond poorly to chemicals, which is funny because they're made of chemicals, but it is what it is. But this stuff from Loon is designed to not only be good for your gear, but good for the environment. So I'll put a link to where you can get Stanley's Ice Off Paste on the Loon website. But of course, if you have a local fly shop, see if they have it. Loon is one of those companies that likes to push people to the brick and mortar dealers that they have in their network. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing podcast. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast app. Rate the podcast over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Then head over to castingacross.com, where there's 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.
Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit fishingbooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.
From dawn to dusk and every moment in between, Captain Justin Leake and Meredith McCord have an exciting adventure waiting in the water. Catch Chasing the Sun, Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV. Waypoint TV, your destination for outdoor entertainment.